Joining me here is my colleague from the NFL Media Group, who, along with Ian Rappaport, has been killing it down at the owners' meeting and throughout this entire non-playing season. Tom Pelissero joining us here from the Breakers in Palm Beach. What's up, Tom? How are you?
I hope that my voice is not drowned out by the sounds of the waves crashing against the rocks here on the lagoon, Rich. It's fairly picturesque when I get a chance to come beyond the building and talk to you here.
Tom, how many times have you and I spoken? I think that's the first time you've ever used the word lagoon with me. Tom, I'm not going to lie. It's a first.
And I'm not going to lie, I had to Google and make sure what type of body of water it was. It is, in fact, a lagoon because there's an island beyond the horizon, and so that separates this lagoon from the Atlantic Ocean.
You know, that's why you're next level in terms of your information is like you don't even want to be inaccurate as to what to call the water by this 5-star resort that we're all at right there, where everyone's at. So let's get right into it. What can you tell me about this vote that went down today behind the scenes? Whatever you know.
Rich, this was always the most likely outcome, and we've talked about this for a month or so on NFL Network. It's postseason only was the natural place to begin, in large part because the numbers are far more skewed in terms of the correlation between the coin toss winner and the game winner than they are in the regular season, where it's 50-50. And that's a function, of course, of the fact that you've got better quarterbacks who are in the playoffs. You've got some offenses that, and particularly in that Bills-Chiefs game last year, appeared unstoppable. So, as much as they talk about this is the equitable thing, we want everyone to have a fair chance, there are plenty of coaches and GMs who I've talked to in recent days who think either it's not worth making this change or go play defense or, no matter how many times you go back and forth, now the team that, the third possession, that can win it. Now that's going to be unfair. Where does it end? There's plenty of coaches who feel that way, but it's not the coaches who cast the votes. It is the owners who cast the votes. And when it boils right down to it, you are an entertainment product, as the NFL and the consumers of that product roundly would like to see the best players get an opportunity in the biggest games. And that rule accomplishes this, even though, as you mentioned, there are going to be unintended consequences. And we'll see how things play out strategically in terms of how teams approach this when the first time they've seen it is in a defining moment in their season.
So other than, I guess, the analytics departments who now get to dig into this and figure out what the best scenarios are, and they can, game it all out and run different permutations of where the ball starts and when you should get it and how you should get it and what happens now. I think, again, most teams are going to want to actually get the ball second in overtime now, and that might be the way that the coin flip, quote-unquote, decides things. What are you hearing around the hotel there of how coaches and general managers think this is going to play out, what the consequences of it will be best to their intentions?
Well, one of the funny things that I heard was that you had kind of this analytics battle going on where one team would present its data that its people had put together, and then other teams would present different data based on their analytical studies of the situation. So you absolutely had some healthy back and forth here. I had a long conversation with a head coach of a team the other day who said what's going to happen, because, again, the rule where, the other rules proposal where it would be if you scored a touchdown and then got a 2-point conversion and the game ends on the first possession, that was really never going to gain traction because it was viewed as too gimmicky, too far outside the fabric of the game. But this head coach said what's going to happen is many, if not all, the teams that end up with the first possession, whether they choose it or not, if they score a touchdown, are going to go for two. Because if you don't, you cede your control over that situation. In other words, you score a touchdown, you kick the extra point. Now the other team can score a touchdown, go for two, and beat you. Now, how many teams are going to do that? It's probably similar to the mindset and the approach that you would have in regular season, end-of-game type situations. But you mentioned the decision on whether or not to take the ball. Absolutely. Part of analytics, a big, almost the entire thing of analytics is you want as much information as possible to guide your decisions. So I would anticipate that many teams are going to be advised, hey, if you win the coin toss, defer in this thing. And then the team that gets the ball first is going to be facing that decision. And I would not be surprised at all if the majority of those teams go for two so that they set the agenda instead of letting the other team have control.
So then if seeking information and having it and wargaming it out and presenting the head coaches with as much of this data going into a possible new ruled overtime, and that's such a crucial aspect of this, Why would owners not want this for the regular season and pilot this thing before the crucible of a winner-go-home game in front of 50 million people? Why not try it out where the first time it happens is a week 3, 1 o'clock kickoff, and we could start to see what unintended consequences are before a winner-go-home game? What's up with that?
It's a great question, and the explanation I've gotten on it is that it's about the data points, that the owners looked at this and saw that it's literally 50-50 in the regular season in terms of winning the coin flip and winning the game. And then in the postseason, I believe it's 10-2. 10 teams won the game after winning the coin flip. Only 2 teams lost. And so that's what they wanted to address first. I would certainly think that if this goes well, and I don't even know how you would define goes well, because obviously somebody's going to walk away from all these situations going, boy, that really burned us right there. If it goes well, I would anticipate that eventually it does get carried over to the regular season. But the NFL has a long history of when they make these major types of changes, they do them incrementally. They do them in small portions. To what extent, there was conversation in the room about doing it within the regular season. That was the proposal. But again, I go back to what we said a month ago when I was told the thing that's going to get the traction is the postseason only, at least to start, just because the numbers are going to show that we've got an issue here, and a large part of that is the quarterbacks in those playoff games are so good.
Tom Pelissero, a few more minutes left with my NFL Media Group colleague here, taking time out of being on television on NFL Network for calling in here. So what is, because there's the Combine and then there's this event. My God, chit-chat everywhere, like literally around every corner and every hallway and every elevator and every bar and every single restaurant. It's insane. So what's the talk about mostly outside of this subject matter there at the Combine? At the owners' meeting.
In terms of the actual agenda at the owners' meeting, this is one of the lightest I think we've ever seen.
Oh, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what everyone else is talking about. Right. What do you got for me? What do you think?
Normally you've got some ongoing things that are going to get resolved, but we're not to the point of any decisions on the Dolphins, not to the point of any decisions on Deshaun Watson. Those two situations are going to generate a ton of conversation. I think that, in all the head coaches and GMs that I, have spoken to this week, I think that the prevailing question is just what's next? Like, what are you hearing is the next thing that's going to happen?
Yes.
Because people bring up wild situations right now. I had one GM just tell me, it's the Wild West right now. Everybody thinks everybody is available because we're seeing trades unlike anything that we've ever seen before. And so teams are getting calls on star players. There are certainly teams that have been in the mix and missed out. For instance, on the wide receivers, who you would anticipate are still going to be active here leading up to and even after the draft. You've obviously got the Baker Mayfield situation, which at this point is dormant. That may take a while. Jimmy Garoppolo, the headline yesterday was John Lynch saying they're not releasing Jimmy Garoppolo, which, why would they release a guy with a non-guaranteed salary who's shown when he's healthy he's a pretty good quarterback in the NFL just because they haven't gotten the offer that they want for him right now. So that may take a while, especially after, with the shoulder surgery. He's not going to be cleared until close to the start of training camp. But I would say that's the number one thing is just what's next. And even, as much this year, because we still could get action here, Rich, in the coming weeks. But, next year, what's it going to be? What are these star wide receivers going to want? The way that you have right now star players who are exacting their leverage and their power over situations more than they ever have before and utilizing different means than they have before. Players' greatest leverage was for a long time not showing up. It was withholding your services, not coming to training camp. Well, the 2020 CBA made it so punitive that we see a lot less of that, but players are figuring out other ways to do it and making noise in the offseason or things that might seem silly like deleting Instagram posts. It has an effect because we live in this echo chamber and you live in an environment right now where the trades that when you hear about them, they almost seem too dumb to check on. They're not too dumb to check on now. Like Rappaport and I talk about that all the time. Like you check on everything. You can hear the stupidest thing ever, but you have to make a call because, who would think going into this offseason, Tyreek Hill's going to be traded to Miami and Devontae Adams is going to be traded to the Raiders within a 1 week span. And we'll deal Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. Nothing big, nothing major. We've never seen anything like this before. And so that's going to have a ripple effect. And, as much as the Rams went all in last year and won the Super Bowl and everybody wants to point to that, you've got how many, 7, 8, 9 teams that made a massive trade in this offseason? It's not going to work out for everybody. And so teams are going to be analyzing how these situations play out. And certainly there are plenty of players and agents, particularly at the wide receiver position, to see where the numbers are going. And can't wait to have their opportunity to try to pull off the same thing.
In the category of it's no longer too dumb to check on, Brady being traded to the Dolphins, did that even get a phone call for you to check on that crazy rumor that's been everywhere, trending on Twitter, all of that? Tom?
We check on everything, Rich. We check on everything. I mean, again, Mike McDaniel had to answer it, called it fake news. It would seem implausible at this point, in part because Tom Brady, from even before he made the announcement on his unretirement, was lobbying some of his teammates to come back and calling people within the league. He's a A-plus recruiter, and he was doing that to Tampa. It would seem surprising at this stage to think suddenly now he's going to go out the back door and end up in Miami. I would also say at some point you would certainly anticipate that they have to address Tom Brady's contract because he's got, I want to say it's a placeholder year for about $10.5 million that he's on this year. That was never intended to be played on. The idea was keep adding a year to his contract, give him a lump sum this year like they did last year when he made $40+ million. I would certainly think that's what's next for Tom Brady, but Rich, you do check on everything.
I bet. And so if I do have 2 more minutes with you, I just want to bite on one of the things you just said, Tom, is that you called Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. You called the Baker Mayfield situation dormant now. Why would it be dormant? Lack of interest is it a money thing? The Browns won't eat his salary. There's nothing on the table they consider worthy of Baker Mayfield. He wants to go someplace that's not willing to take him. Why would this be dormant right now?
He's due $18.8 million fully guaranteed at a time that the Browns are not simply going to give him away, and they don't intend to release him, and there just aren't very many starting jobs available. So if he's going to be traded to, let's say, hypothetically, a Tampa, which, of course, may want a young guy to groom. They got Kyle Trask there, too, but maybe you're thinking ahead and you want the next guy behind Tom Brady. You're not going to take on Baker Mayfield, who right now would be making double what your starting quarterback, the greatest who's ever played, Tom Brady, is making. So you would need Cleveland to eat a chunk of that money. Now, I can tell you, when Cleveland was initially having trade calls, they did not want to eat money, and the price was pretty high. It's pretty similar to what all these quarterbacks do. They wanted a second-round pick and something else for Baker Mayfield. At this stage, it is difficult to believe that he's going to get that. I think that I know that there are teams who did not have Baker Mayfield, with a first-round grade coming out in the draft several years ago. So that's a factor, too, your prior evaluations. And then what happened when he played hurt last year. I don't think that there are 32 better quarterbacks than Baker Mayfield in the NFL if you get back to the 2020 Baker Mayfield. But again, the money and the draft pick compensation and the situation all have to line up for Baker Mayfield. I do anticipate he's going to be wearing a different jersey, certainly by week 1 and most likely by the start of training camp. But for the Browns, the way that they look at things, there's really not a big rush on him. His contract's already fully guaranteed. That's a change from the prior CBA. They would have been able to get out of it before the start of the league year under the old collective bargaining agreement. Now you're locked into that money. And ultimately, you may have to eat some of it to move on from, so they can stand pat, see what else might happen, what crazy thing is behind door number 2. That nobody would have thought 2 weeks ago that Matt Ryan would end up with the Colts after a failed push by the Falcons at Deshaun Watson. There's dominoes all over the place, and right now it's hard to predict where they're going to fall.
Yeah, and what's the escrow check that the Haslams are going to have to scratch for Deshaun Watson? Well, how much is that check going to be?
It's $184 million after the $46 million they pay him this year. I think they get a credit for about $15 million of that. But that's a big reason that teams don't want to do this. The owners aren't, they're not rich guys for no reason. Having $180 million sitting there in a bank rather than being able to, play in the market and make money off it is not ideal for anybody. And there's absolutely owners and other, GMs who are upset about the contract and the way that it was structured and the amount of fully guaranteed money, not only because of the situation with Deshaun Watson, but as one league executive or team executive earlier put it, like they just changed the entire landscape of economics in the NFL. And now every agent, every player is going to want a similar type of deal. We'll see who's willing to go there. It's change how people are going to look at this moving forward.
All right. Well, enjoy the lagoon the rest of the day and the rest of the your stay there in Palm Beach. Thanks for the time, Tom. Excellent as always. Thank you.
Anytime, Rich. Thanks.
You got it. That's Tom Pelissero. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.